child grow up, they're gonna always remember, yeah, dad was always in training camp, dad was always on the road with boxing and the events, but dad ain't never missed no birthday, dad ain't never missed anything important, dad was always there. And that's what they're gonna always remember.
Your mom ever tell you what a good father you are?
Yeah, she said it before. Yeah, she said, Bud, a great dad. Now I always check, I say I'm a great father. It's the difference.
Would you be Terence Crawford, the champion we know, if it weren't for that dynamic with you and your mom?
I think she just put the little extra fire, you know, on top of the fire that I already had.
You made him champion.
He made himself champion. I'm just proud of him because he's my son.
Now, I credit her with that. She gave him credit for what he did. But even the documentary itself tried to imply that she was the reason behind it, right? And the idea being that this is what's necessary. This is the tough love black men need. Dysfunction. He needed affirmation. But he turned her dysfunction into affirmation best he could. He turned it into a fuel that he could use. But that in and of itself is not necessarily a healthy way to go about it. It was just the only way available to him. And he did well with it, and I salute him for that. But again, this is a recipe for disaster if we learn from this that this is not only acceptable, but this is more than acceptable, that this is desired. Right? That this should be the dynamic we look for, where boys are withheld from affection, from love. That the method for raising successful black men is to make sure that they are without affirmation and love. And that seems to be the message that I see in the public as far as this is concerned, because his most recent bout on top of that, right, comes out on top. I saw this documentary a year ago, and I commented on Facebook about it a year ago, but somehow it came back up in light of his most recent victory. And all of a sudden became the reason behind it that people were initiating. And I don't think he pushed this dynamic, because you could see him, he would reword it when they would try to pose it that way. He was trying not to go there, but at the same time, he was trying to protect his mother. This is the kind of emotional labor that men perform. Remember earlier when I was telling you about being everywhere from 9 to 17 years old, and the police would stalk me, throw me over the hood, put me on the ground no matter what I was wearing, pat me down, go through my stuff. And they would do it sometimes in front of other groups of people or in front of the school or whatever. It was a regular kind of thing, right? The reason I didn't tell my mother wasn't because I was afraid. Hell, I didn't do anything wrong. There wasn't nothing for me to be afraid about. I didn't tell her because I was performing a form of emotional labor for her. Because I didn't want to stress her out. I didn't want to worry her. I didn't want to bother her. And I'm not saying she did anything wrong in my story. What I'm saying to you is men, and or boys especially, but men, we learn how to perform a very particular type of emotional labor. And I'm really talking about black men. Men do it, boys do it in general, but in our community, we're dealing with very specific issues. And I think black boys and men learn how to provide these types of emotional labor to no fanfare, to no acknowledgement, so much so that people don't even believe it happens. People don't even believe it exists. This is why when you sit down with your wife and a counselor and they start talking about emotional labor, what they mean is how often she has to pick up around you at the house, or how often she has to deal with your lack of emotional vocabulary, or how she has to endure you. But there's no frame of reference for the type of emotional labor you perform for her, for mothers, for wives, for sisters, for girlfriends. There's no language for it, because at the end of the day, they don't believe it exists. And then if they'll tell you that it exists, they'll tell you to use the language they've already provided, which is so generic and watered down. But whenever you actually hear it being used, it's always about what women endure for men. So there is still effectively not a language for your experience. This is why I called it male relationship emotional labor. I titled it that way for a specific reason, because there needs to be conceptual space for males to articulate at any age, in any class setting, in any environment, the nature of their emotional labor to those around them. And it's not just limited to women. We perform very distinct types of emotional labor for children. We provide very distinct types of emotional labors for communities, for families in general. John Henryism is not an accidental term when it comes to Black men. A steel-driving man that sacrifices his life to accomplish this particular goal, which in a larger setting is usually about taking care of family. Men who spent decades doing menial jobs that broke their bodies and their minds to provide for families. And often those families don't even remember their first fucking name. And they die providing houses, providing resources. But the only discussion you'll get about that dude is how he had another woman at one point in time, had a kid out of wedlock. And this becomes a permanent indictment on whoever this man was. And he's not even remembered in his own family outside of grandpa. But don't nobody want to talk about how the fact that he might have had to raise a child that wasn't even his and he might have known it. And we don't talk about those things because criticism is only really acceptable when it comes to men. This is the kind of internalized misandry that we support and accept in the Black community, most particularly. We remember Big Mama. There is no Big Daddy. Papa, he was around for a while, but he was a Rolling Stone. Word, is that all he was? Or might there have been a reason why things played out the way they did? Right? But again, that's not part of the conversation. Conversation is a one-way dynamic. Where he has to hold all the criticism, she has to hold all the praise. If you try to give some of the praise to Black men, you're immediately accused of being toxic and being misogynistic. If you try to criticize Black women, you're immediately told you're being misogynistic and toxic. But as long as you compliment Black women or avoid criticism at all, it's acceptable. And if you support the criticism of only men and boys, it's acceptable. See, this is the reason I talk about the gynocracy, is we have tried and used every ideological framework possible to analyze the Black situation. We've dealt with it in terms of race, color, class. We've dealt with it in terms of geography, skin tone. Every framework you can think of. From Black Marxism to revolutionary nationalism. We've dealt with it from conservatism to atheism. Every framework we have used to analyze the Black situation. You want to know the only one we've avoided? Critically analyzing the role of women in the state and how that impacts the formation and the functioning of the Black family. That's the one we're not allowed to talk about. Last year, I think it was, I went on to a Black nationalist channel. I was invited to participate in a discussion, not a debate, a panel discussion. And the question was something along the lines of, if something can we criticize Black women? Are Black women responsible for X, Y, and Z? I forget the exact title. One of the things I noticed that happened throughout the entire discussion is that the discussion kept shifting back to criticizing men. Even in this discussion. Now, apparently they had a couple of lead-up shows that were about criticizing men, most of them turned out to be about criticizing men. But when we actually got to the conversation where the show was about criticizing women, each of the panelists would keep participating and shifting it back to criticizing men. And it got to a point where all I did in the discussion is say, the fact that this keeps shifting back to men tells you how ill-equipped we are to criticize women. And we can't move past criticizing women to looking at the real issue is in terms of her relationship with the state and what that spawns in her behavior over generations. We can't get to that because as soon as the criticism is levied, it's dismissed. It's dismissed as nothing but misogyny. And as long as the thought process is stifled at that point, it's going to look like misogyny, and that's going to be the end of the discussion. And people will swear that if you even so much did it or attempted to do it, you just hate women. This is one of the things that I've already heard about my book, that both me and my book is all about a hatred of women. Oh, and if folks ain't even read it. But why should I expect any different? Hell, I still see people talking shit about Tommy Curry's The Man Not, and ain't even read it. And it's been out for years, right? But this is the idea. We've tried every method known to understand our situation and form solutions based off our understanding. But here's the problem. If you try to create a solution based off of an inaccurate or faulty understanding of the problem, the solution doesn't work. Now, I spend the majority of my time talking about the gynocracy. And I'm not doing it because I'm saying it's the only problem in Black America. I'm doing it because it's the missing part of the puzzle. No solution you develop is going to work, because here's the thing. Every solution you can think of to uplift any given community is going to come down to family. Every ideology you have is going to come down to family. But if the fundamental problem starts at the family and relationship level, no fucking solution is going to work. And if you want to dance around one of the most pivotal aspects to Black family formation, then get mad because the solutions you propose don't work, you just keep going in circles. The missing part of the conversation has to be added to the equation. I'm not saying Black women just woke up one day dysfunctional. We got all kinds of shit impacting Black men, Black women, boys, girls, LGBT, you name it. There's all kinds of issues, and many of them are justified. There's rationale behind it. But if you're going to take a few demographics, remove them from critique, and ignore the institutional relationship they have with institutions that are hostile to Black men, and then wonder why none of this shit works, and then more than that, wonder why so many young people don't want to participate in your ideological solution, because they're seeing how it doesn't work. It doesn't work, not because it in and of itself has no merit, whatever idea you're trying to propose. I don't care if it's a religious solution, a political solution, a cultural solution, as long as you're dancing around, what do they call that, the elephant in the room? What makes the gynocracy a problem is it's not naturally formed. It is a product of policy, and it exacerbates behavior, negative behavior rooted around ideas of Black female superiority. It's become a cancer. And as the resources and institutions are being withdrawn that have been so common, particularly for Black women, going back damn near to World War II, but we can talk about different levels of it, different types of it from much longer than that. As those resources are finally starting to be withdrawn, now you're starting to see a different type of dysfunction. You guys noticing an uptick in the last 5 years of women coming into male spaces, newly formed male spaces where men are finally starting to talk about their own issues? They're starting to come in. And the first response is often not to listen, it's to start shit. It's to troll, it's to fight, because she got to get you back under mommy's thumb, as BGS would put it. Because the fact that you're no longer accepting her dysfunction is inconceivable. You need to shut up and take it. You need to get back in line, not raise questions, and damn sure not criticize me or mama, as it were. And I'm not just talking about mothers. I'm talking about the Black feminine idea that has become rooted in the gynocracy. If you're not willing to, if you're willing to critique it, there's going to be a problem, because she's not equipped to deal with that. She's not had to deal with it. But as resources start to get withdrawn, she's starting to realize what women all around the world know. In these situations, you need community, you need family, you need men. And if you discarded them and told them you didn't need them, they wasn't shit. I mean, this is not even his wife. This is his mother, Terence Crawford's mother. What does she say? He ain't gonna be shit. The grown-up equivalent of that in a man's life is a woman who says, I don't need you for shit. But this idea, and I talked about this in the Rebecca Lynn Pope video I did. Rebecca Lynn Pope is talking about a very small subset of well-to-do Black women. And this is the group that we assume that represents the majority, right? The six-figure earning Black women that you see in high restaurant and high-cost restaurants, right? Where 6 of them are sitting together in their red bottoms and, you know, their Mercedes outside, and somehow this becomes the idea where Black women are. And as Rebecca Lynn said at one point, they're running circles around Black men, but that's not true. There's a smaller sample of six-figure earning Black women than there are Black males. They're even smaller. And somehow they become the face of Black womanhood. No, that's not it. The majority of Black women are struggling. They really are. But they've been brainwashed through popular media and simultaneously through what's being handed down in families to believe they're fundamentally better than their men and that they don't need their men until other groups of women find their men. It's like a kid on Christmas that didn't like the red bike they got, tossed it to the side, and came back home and saw another kid playing on that bike and having a ball. You know what a kid's gonna do? Kick that other kid back, take the bike back, have fun with it for 2 minutes, and then as soon as that kid is out of sight, toss it to the side again. That's what the fuck we're dealing with. That's how black men are being seen and treated. And boys as well. This is what's going on with it. And Creative Force's least Mercedes. Exactly.